So this concrete's not very old. It's only about 26 hours old. And on lots of jobs, particularly a vertical job in a wall or something, you would want more strength in your concrete before you start pulling off the support of the forms. But a footing like this, it's flat on the ground. The rebar there's no way to disrupt that connection with the rebar. So I'm comfortable stripping these footing forms off of here, specifically so that I can reestablish the layout. I can put, again, this time on the concrete, exactly the outside of the footprint of the foundation of this house. The first part of stripping these forms, and the step that's critical to being able to do the layout, is to get the spreaders, that's those 2x2s, and the template, the rebar template, the 2x4, off of the top so I can reestablish the string lines and then snap the perimeter of the building. Right now is the moment that I'm really glad that I took a great deal of trouble to get the corners of these footing forms virtually exactly where they go. Even though they don't have to be exactly there to catch the stem wall, now that I am reestablishing the footprint of the building, I'm really glad that I can trust these forms as if the batter boards were still in place. Essentially what I'm doing is recreating the string lines that I had in place. Really is about the second step. Yes, second step on the layout that I did last week. I am putting nails right back in the same holes, 8 inches in from the outside, that I had them in before. And then once all the strings are in, the entire boundary of the building, we'll get out our tape measures and verify that the dimensions are still exactly right. And this time they need to be exactly right. The reason I'm establishing the building line with string first and not a chalk line first is I want to be able to make any final last-minute adjustments in the exact dimensions of the building that I locate on this footing. Because once it's located on the footing and the masons lay up their block wall, like it or not, that's the size of your building. Now this string is known in a case like this as a dry line. Not a chalk line, but a dry line. And maybe the implication of that is clear, but it's not soaked in chalk, it's not soaked in ink, it is not making a mark. The string itself is the mark. So we're going to stretch a dry liner on the perimeter of this footing, double check the measurement. Once the measurement's right, we'll transfer that location down onto the concrete and snap it out. Nail on the line. Yeah.
Do you see that little square of concrete?
So you remember how fussy I was about trying to get these forms exactly where they needed to be? I mean, that was good then, because I had confidence they're exactly where they need to be now. But if they are off, if it got hit by the truck or kicked around or this footing is off an inch or maybe even 2, I can still slide the block left and right, forward and backward on this surface to establish the location of the building. Now at some point the block would begin to intrude into the location of the rebar and then it gets really tricky. But in practical terms, I've got some fudge factor here. I can slide this wall around as I'm laying it out to get it exactly where it goes. Hopefully, accuracy previously will reduce the work today. Okay, so I've played around with the 2 long sort of control sidelines. They're just right. I had to fudge on my nail holes on my forms about 1/4 of an inch, but we are parallel now. The 2 main sides of the house are parallel. I'm going to work off of that to establish the end line, which is going to be just right there also. I'll run the diagonal, the hypotenuse, you know, a squared, b squared, c squared. I'll run that in here and drop it in on the baseline. And then with these 3 lines in place and snapped, I'll just reestablish everything coming out to the garage and we'll see how we do. Nice line. So now I'm going to range it on through that mark. All right, there is a control line off the front of the house that I am real comfortable with. We are exactly 4 1/8 inches away from that rebar, which centers it in the cell nicely. I think we have recreated what we were shooting for when we set this up. Now I'm going to go snap the same thing on the other side, and we'll have two parallel lines exactly the right distance apart. I'm going to snap this in two halves. Snapping 40 feet, you know, the wind's starting to blow. It's easy to kind of get a faint line. So I'm going to come down this dry line, which is this string line, make sure it's clean, and transfer the mark onto the footing. Going to leave my pencil there so I can find the mark. Hook the chalk line on the same nail. Twice. So I haven't quite got every line snapped, but I've got enough of the lines snapped and enough of the locations verified to know that we hit it. We're where we need to be. I've had to fudge 1/4 of an inch there, 3/8 of an inch here to bring this thing into square and to the dimensions right. I'm using the plans, I'm using a plumb bob with a gammon reel, I'm using a level, I'm using string line over and over in several different ways. I'm using 2 different kinds of tapes. I'm using math, you know, Pythagorean theorem, a squared, b squared, c squared, critical component in being able to, you know, lay something like this out. And so whatever tools you've got to pull out, however much time you have to invest, this is the time to get it really good, because deviations accumulate. It's kind of it's a principle of construction that over time the deviations that are built in that happen, and there will be errors and there will be gaps and there will be, you know, there will be problems, and those things build on each other until they can get out of control. And so even if it's frustrating, even if you have to go back a few times and adjust and tweak and find that happy place where everything is within your allowable tolerance, and it needs to be narrow. At this point, your allowable tolerance needs to be, yeah, 0 is plenty acceptable. And if I have to accept 1/8 of an inch, okay, I will. And that's not practical in every case. And if we were laying out, you know, a barn that was a rectangle, yeah, whatever. But this isn't a barn, is it? There are angles and there are planes and there are things that will be ordered that have to fit the way the plans are drawn. You've noticed that the string is an important tool in layout, especially with concrete. You got to have string and you got to know how to use it. You can waste a lot of time playing with string. You've seen me doing some knots and tying it off and doing some stuff. And if you're curious about the details of those knots and those processes, we've got a video specifically about how to handle string in a concrete layout situation. You might like it. All of the information concerning costs on this project can be found on our website. There's a way for you to get a hold of that there. And I appreciate very much the fact that you're watching right now, that you've watched clear to the end, and I hope that you'll tell your friends about it. Thanks for watching.